Sewing mistakes and fitting adjustments will always be a part of sewing, and that makes a seam ripper a necessary part of the sewing journey. Hi, I'm Kim with Dritz. The primary function of a seam ripper is to safely remove unwanted or unneeded stitches. Before the seam ripper, a straight edge was used, and that method is still used today. However, it can be dangerous to both the user and the fabric. Let's look at how to safely use a seam ripper and some of the other tasks that can be done with a seam ripper. Safety first is always important. Always hold your projects in your hands. This will give you better control and better visibility to the stitches that you are trying to remove. When using the seam ripper, be sure that you're pointing it away from your body and away from your hands. You don't want to poke your fingers or the palms of your hand with that sharp point. To remove stitches, there are a few methods that you can use, and a lot of that will depend on the type of seam that you have. For a pressed seam that has open exposed stitches, if you've backstitched, the first thing you want to do is to remove a few of those stitches so that you can start to open up the seam. And then once you remove those stitches, you can see that you can just easily start to pull the seam apart. So you want to carefully go in and rip those stitches, and then you can pull it apart some more. And you just keep doing that until you've opened up the entire seam. For top stitching or exposed stitches, slide the seam ripper under the stitch, breaking just the thread. And with this heavy thread, I'm doing every other stitch. You can go 3 or 4 with lighter weight thread. Then you turn the project over, lift out the bobbin thread by sliding the seam ripper under a stitch. There you can see you just pull that out and all the stitches come out. Then using the seam fix, you can pull out all those loose stitches. This is an example of a seam that is hidden in a project and we can't easily get to the stitches. So you need to stretch that seam and you can see where those stitches are. Then you can go in and just break the one stitch, and I just went in there and I just broke one stitch. So now you see I've got a little hole. So you can take the safety ball side and you can slip it into that seam. Then with holding the seam taut, you could just slide right down that seam and you can easily open up that stitch. This method works best with the heavy fabrics like canvas or home deck fabrics. For serger seams, there's actually 2 methods you can use, and this curved blade seam ripper is perfect for either method. First one, you can slide just under the straight stitches, go every 2 or 3 stitches and just break those straight stitches. And what that does, you can go on the back side and just kind of pull them out. You can see that they're all broken. So then what that does is it allows the looper threads to just be pulled. I'm using the back side of the seam ripper and you can just pull those looper threads out. And then you can take your seam fix and you can just erase all those threads away. The other method that you can use is just sliding it straight under the looper threads and just cutting those threads. Again, being very careful to not cut your hand. With this method, then you need to follow up by breaking all the straight stitches, but you see they come out very easily. And you can just pull away all the loose threads and again, use your seam fix to erase everything away. You can also use a seam ripper to open buttonholes. For this method, you will need a straight pin and you'll need a seam ripper. A fine blade seam ripper does work the best unless your fabrics are very heavy. The fine blade is really the best one to use. So for this method, we're going to take the back of the seam ripper and actually run it down that middle channel in the buttonhole. And you can do that a few times, and this actually scores the fabric. It separates any stitches because every machine makes them a little bit differently. To keep from cutting through the end of the bar tack, take a pin and just pin it just below that bar tack in the buttonhole. Then you just poke in, but you can see I've got my fingers here, but I've got them separated so I don't hit my finger there. I want to make sure that I have a nice gap, and you just simply cut the buttonhole right up until you hit the pin. And then you have a nice buttonhole that's cut very easily. Always remember that a seam ripper is a sharp tool and it should be used with caution. But as you can see, it is also a necessary tool for our sewing projects and can be used for more than just ripping out stitches.